I am still without my computer. So I'm still doing everything from my laptop, which I know I'm being a little whiny right now, but it is really hard to do this type of work on a small screen. And maybe it's just because I've been spoiled, but I'm used to having multiple things going on at the same time, used to multitasking, and just like drilling down onto one screen is like, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to another human being on the face of the earth ever. But I do have one thing going for me though. Check out the Batman shirt. Isn't it great? Holy moly. I got this on Saturday. It's got Batman, it's got Joker. I think it's got Two-Face and Penguin on it. It is, man, this is just happiness right here. I also have a Miami Vice shirt I'll have to rock one day too. People tell me sometimes, like, you can't base your entire personality off of shirts. I know I've made this joke before. I'm going to make it again. And I'm like, what you going to do to stop me, huh? All right. So, I am still absolutely stuck in grading land, and it is a slog and it's slow. It should be done by Thursday, and it will speed up if I ever get my computer fixed, but right now that's what we're looking at. It just takes time. So we're in the how-to paper section of this class, and we're all writing how-to stuff. So we're shooting for about 4 pages. It could go into 5 with the info mapping stuff. If you use a lot of images, I might have to lengthen it a little bit. But the main thing I want to talk to you about today, we're going to have a kind of mini assignment that I'm putting together for Wednesday. And so today's video is going to be a little bit short because I'm kind of really packing a lot of material in for the video on Wednesday. I do have to go back and, grade some of the discussion posts. Those are kind of backlogged right now for obvious reasons. But this is going to be the first assignment where we have a real focus on research. And this is kind of an interesting way to start the research conversation because it's a unusual kind of way of getting into this because typically the way we've been doing research in these classes is we wait till the very end, the last big research paper assignment, and we start going over research techniques then. And I have found more and more that is a tactic that is just not a good idea. It's really not. You're expecting a great deal of material to be drilled into the brain in a relatively short amount of time when you put research at the end of the curriculum like that. So one of the things that I really have wanted to try to do is to sprinkle a little bit of research throughout the semester, a little bit less so much focus at the end, and to kind of also, and this is going to sound really weird, but to slowly dial up the complexity of the research content in the class and the kind of impact of it. When we start introducing research into an English course, you're really you're putting a lot of more risk in the writing. And one of the things that I just realized, this is kind of a paper I could write for publishing. Writing, I think, has a great deal of risk associated with it that I think that sometimes we as scholars don't really recognize. One of the first layers of that risk, and yeah, my brain actually really is buzzing right now because of this. Before I get into the layers of risk in writing, let me actually kind of compare this to math for a minute. When you're in a math class and you make a mistake, you're going to lose the points, right? You're going to get the question wrong. You're going to, have to go back, relearn a concept. There's not a lot that can seriously go wrong there, right? Which is not to downplay the importance of math. I know I dump on math as a concept a great deal. But English actually has a lot more kind of personal risk associated with it in some ways that, mathematics and other courses simply don't. Now, with writing, risk comes in 2 primary fashions. One, putting your thoughts, your ideas out there can be extremely anxiety provoking because we could be judged for our ideas. We could be judged for our assumptions of the world. And so, there's a lot of kind of sort of dangerous ideas floating around out there. that if people find out you have those ideas or you've entertained those ideas, it can leave you very exposed. And I don't want to get too deep into this right now. I think we all know the kind of thing that I'm talking about. My favorite example of this, because it's not as dangerous as it used to be, but there was a time in this country during because for some weird reason this laptop blinks in and out with its connection. So anyway, in the 1950s, there was this time called the Red Scare. And if you were entertaining socialist or communistic ideas during the Red Scare, it could have resulted in a great deal of legal and personal and professional trouble for you. Now, and again, I don't want to get too carried away with this. We do still kind of have this sensibility, but it's not as powerful as it used to be. Now, if you call yourself a socialist or even a communist, you don't necessarily have to worry so much about the very heavy stigma that's associated with that, because we don't necessarily go after people's straight up political beliefs in such aggressive ways anymore. I mean, you do have to worry about it, but it's not as strong as it used to be when in the 50s, when we had that major kind of persecution for people's political beliefs. But at the same time, there's a lot of things that people can hold near and dear in their personal belief sets that leaves them feeling a bit exposed. But the other thing is I think there's a bit of a plagiarism cheating liability with the actual technical process of writing that sometimes gets a little overplayed. And this is going to sound really, really weird, but hear me out for a minute. When we start doing research, I get students who are very, very concerned about whether or not they're plagiarizing or not. And is it possible to accidentally plagiarize something? Yes, it is. But for me as a writing instructor, I thoroughly believe that students need to be able to screw things up, right? I thoroughly believe that students need to be able to make mistakes without, having a train dropped on their face, right? So there's a big difference for me between when you are misusing a quote or when you're not citing correctly and when you've plagiarized something. So, I actually did not plan for this video to be so unbelievably research heavy. I wanted to get more into the how-to aspect, but, we can always dive more into that on Wednesday. But let me just kind of roll with this idea for a minute so you can kind of understand some of my expectations. Plagiarism is when you are being deceptive, right? You are trying to pull the wool over my or someone else's eyes, and you are passing off someone else's work as your own. There's a lot more in depth and a lot more effort into plagiarism that goes into an accidental misusing of a quote, right? So even if you go so far as to put a quote in your paper and you forget to tell me where that came from, as long as it's not a major, gigantic part of the paper that is not your own words, I'm probably going to send that back to you with a note that says, you need to cite this. Now, here's the thing. That you need to cite this is going to result in a lot of points that you're not getting because that's a big problem that you need to fix, right? So a misused quote is typically something that can be fixed. That's not something that I'm going to necessarily report you for, right? I'm not going to be like, this student's cheating. You obviously made a mistake. Where I will report you for plagiarism is if I find a whole section of your paper that has been copy and pasted, or chunks of it have been copied and pasted from different sources, because the problem is that's not your voice anymore, right? You get a warning for that. And if I'm feeling very generous, you get a warning for that. If you have a whole paper that's been lifted from something like Wikipedia, that's bad, right? There's degrees, there's varying degrees of plagiarism, right? There's hard plagiarism, there's kind of soft plagiarism, and there's simple mistakes. I've had a lot of students turn in stuff that's really close to plagiarism because they did what's called patch writing. Patch writing is when you're taking a whole bunch of different quotes and a whole bunch of different sections maybe you kind of reword some of it in your own words, but for the most part, you didn't actually put a lot of work into writing anything down. You've sort of meshed this weird Frankenstein monster together and you've turned it in. That is close. Like, you need to be extremely careful. I believe I've had situations where students have been getting away with that. I'm not going to go so far as to say they were taught to do that, but it's very obvious to me that there are situations where students have been allowed to get away with that type of writing. And what I hear from those types of situations is students really just don't feel like they have the kind of personal authority to talk about a subject. So they go and they get what somebody else has said and try to so thoroughly integrate it with their own thoughts that it ceases to be theirs. Now, the reason I'm telling you all this is because we're going to take a very soft approach to our research this time, because I kind of want to sort of, as we begin doing this, not necessarily saddle you with so much weight. Because like I said, this can be extremely intimidating, because when we're writing and we're putting all this discourse on the line, it's a lot of responsibility. So as we're doing this how-to paper, and as we're choosing how-to subjects, I want you to go out and find sources. I want you to go and find things that give you information about the topic that you've chosen, right? I'm going to give you 3 examples on Wednesday, 3 YouTube videos, because I'm sorry, I am all about the YouTube, all about the, going and seeing things acted out, seeing how things are kind of spaced with something that's not necessarily so reading focused. But you are not necessarily experts in anything. That's really harsh, right? I'm sure there are people out there who can change their oil, right? I'm sure there are people out there who can do things. But just because you can do something doesn't necessarily mean that you are an expert in it yet. Like, I can write a great deal of stuff, but I would not say I'm an expert in publishing because I'm not in publishing, right? I guess I am kind of an expert in writing because I have bona fides, right? I went to school, I earned a degree that says that I have been trained and I know the method for delivering this information. Just because you know a lot about a subject doesn't necessarily mean that you know a lot about delivering that subject in an effective way, right? So the only reason I can sit up here and tell you a lot about writing and, set up these exercises and the assignments to then grade you is because, I've got those bona fides, but none of you guys have those bona fides, right? So you're being put in a position where you are kind of speaking on things that you aren't necessarily qualified to talk about. And that's okay. That's how we learn. But what I want you to do is, when you pick this how to write it, this how to assign, when you pick this subject, I want you to go out there. You can do this on YouTube. You can go on Google. You can go all sorts of different places. We can keep this research informal. When we get to the next assignment, we'll ratchet down so that we're using more formal scholarly stuff for research. But right now, this is very informal. I want you to go out there and find the information from other people who have covered this topic as well. Now, the way we're going to treat this is a little different from a traditional research paper. I'm not even necessarily certain I want you citing anything. Rather, I want you to get a sense of what the conversation is, right? I want you to get a sense of how people are doing this thing that you are going to guide through, right? So just again, another weird example of this. I've patched some holes in my walls. I have 3 boys. Holes get punched in my drywall quite often, right? I've patched them. I've done it quite a few times. I have a pretty good method for patching those holes. I went out and I actually looked at a guide on how to patch holes in your wall this morning. And I realized there's a lot of different ways to do it, right? Depending on the size of the hole, where it's located, the different products you can use rather than just using spackle or mud. You can actually use these kind of like patches, stuff that I didn't even necessarily know was out there, right? So the point here is, you can consider yourself an expert in something, but we all kind of have blind spots, right? We all have, none of us are perfect in our knowledge of a topic. So when you go out there and you start looking at guides yourself, there might be stuff out there you haven't necessarily thought about in the method for your how-to. Well, if I had to do this assignment, one of the things that I would absolutely love to do would be to talk about collecting these shirts and reselling them, because there is a whole market for these shirts that people have made a lot of money off of. I find that stuff so interesting. But, there's guides, there's information. There's people like me out there who are basically trafficking or, making a kind of living or building a kind of professional identity out of being an expert in a particular field. And these are people that you can get information from and kind of build your own information delivery using them as kind of a springboard. Now, when I say you don't necessarily have to cite these people, I mean you don't necessarily have to cite them within your how-to guide itself. You can come up with your how-to guide and get that information that's kind of available for free in the ecosystem, right? But what we do need to do is give credit, right? So the way we're going to treat research here is we're not necessarily going to worry about documenting where we got stuff from in our paper. We're going to worry about giving credit to the places we did get information. That's not necessarily the way that we'll handle this later. And it's not something you should do out in the real world if you are, writing a paper or if you're sharing ideas that aren't your own. You need to give credit, right? You usually need to kind of give credit within your text or your body of work when you are bringing up an idea that is not yours. But again, I think there's something to be said about starting this idea slowly. We're going to include at the end of our how-to guide a list of the sources that we used when we were putting the stuff together. It's a way for us to kind of sort of get our feet wet as we're talking about different sources, and as we're especially going to start talking about citing stuff online. I have a student in one of my classes who I've been working with a lot on bibliographic citations. I don't want to talk about that today because, I've got way too much on my plate right now. But I've been working with her on bibliographic citations, and she's having to write these in APA. It's been a long time since I've worked with APA. And one of my habits, one of the things that I've enjoyed doing with students is showing them tools online to generate citations automatically. You have to pay for APA access, which is astounding to me. I thought that there were all these tools out there that you could use to go and generate an APA citation. But in actuality, you can't even use those manual tools for it's really, really messing with my brain. So we're going to talk a lot about forming bibliographic citations. That's going to be the thing that I want you to engage with on this paper. Now, again, this is an aspect of research that we're going to play with that's not necessarily going to be a boot to your neck. This is a very small part of it. We're going to start out slow. And when we get to the next assignment, we'll start putting in actual indicators in our writing and our text that, more accurately discuss where we're getting information from. So we're starting this slow. The assignment Wednesday is, I think, going to be kind of interesting. I've gathered together a few, I think, really good how-to videos that we'll kind of analyze and discuss. There's a lot of different ways of doing a how-to that I'm starting to realize I can subdivide this myself further. There's general tips and tricks. There's a very in-depth guide. There's a silly how-to that I very much enjoy because I don't know if you guys have noticed, not exactly the most, hardline serious person, but I'm starting to notice that, there are different styles of how-to that you can totally put together, that we can experiment so that you don't necessarily have to sit in front of your computer with just this, I need to write a how-to. We can think about the different types, which I'll arm you with, right? And we'll talk about how to identify, how to discuss, so that you have a little bit more guidance and a little bit more options as to what type of how-to assignment you would like to put together. Anyway, we got some exciting stuff going on. I'm very interested. For just a quick discussion assignment today, nothing big. I knew I said I wasn't going to do one today, but heck with it. It's points, right? You want points. I want you to find a how-to guide. Find a how-to guide, share it in the forum. Let's see what we find just out there in the wild, right? Anyway, you'll have a much more in-depth thing to do on Wednesday. I'm hoping and praying I get my computer back at some point in the next 16 years. I'm grading, and I think we'll have a lot of fun with this one, all right? And I'm desperately hoping we get to do our team session this week. I'll be working with my computer here to see if I can get it working. At the very least, maybe I could get one of the classroom computers, or maybe I'll even do this from a colleague's office if I can't get this one to work. Anyway, I need lunch. I'm going to go get a chicken sandwich. You guys have a great day. Hopefully things are going better on your end.